proves we can't ever really know what's going on.
Appearances can be deceptive.
Tom, I was just speculating about a hypothesis. I know I don't know nothing.
Uncertainty. That is appropriate for matters in this world.
There, we're in a tight spot.
Hello, welcome to Framework. I am Al Schwartz. With me, as always, is John Bernard.
Hey, hello.
We are turning to the Coen-Oscopy today for The Man Who Wasn't There. Think probably the most forgotten of all Coen Brothers movies, even the ones that are more directly hated. I think people remember that they made The Lady Killers. And if you're asking me, even movie geeks, to list all the Coen Brothers movies, this is probably the one that is they're most frequently stuck on for the last slot. But anyway, we had one person who volunteered, said, maybe I want to be on The Man Who Wasn't There episode. And that's Mr. Lino. We are very happy to have you back.
Hello there. I'm very happy to be here.
Welcome.
So why did you throw us out? I mean, you gave us some other options, but we pounced on nobody else.
I did. But this was definitely one of the options. And largely because I'm all about the underdog. I'm all about, forgotten cinema. And this was one I genuinely enjoyed. And I actually think it's a terrific film, and it does a lot of things really well. And the context of it, I think is why it's forgotten, because it came out at a time, and I think it was released in an era where there was a big shift in how cinema was made from then on, i.e. 9/11. But this was a wonderful opportunity for me to revisit this film and try to remember why I liked it so much. And I'm really appreciative to say that, there's a lot of things that still work for me.
I think this was one that was going to have a hard time lighting up the box office in any time or place that you might release it. I don't know if there ever was a moment for a film this. I don't know. I mean, stately isn't even quite the right word, but I don't inert sounds too harsh, I think.
Right.
But it is certainly about an inert protagonist.
Sure. What were the films that were coming out for the Coen brothers prior to that? I was wondering, was it just after Big Lebowski, not too long after that?
It was just after Oh Brother was the prior one.
Oh, so I think
which is a very lively film.
Right, exactly. And this is not that kind of film. But all the same, I'd say maybe this is on a personal note. I was starting to enter my college era, and that was a deeply cynical time for me. While at the same time in college is when I started to study film noir, which if you're a student or a fan of film noir, this film is very much a fan service in some respects to that. And perhaps that's what aligned really well with me. But if you are expecting the Big Lebowski or Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? You're probably going to be disappointed in that regard.
Well, feels like a zigzag, they'd done some big comedies. They'd done some, stuff along those lines that had been, very successful. Oh Brother, I think, is one of their biggest hits. And it felt like there was an aspect of their output that had been underserved, I guess. And that was this sort of noir potboiler kind of thing, in the Blood Simple vein or the Miller's Crossing vein a little bit. And so they were about due for one of these, I suppose. It couldn't be more different from what they had been putting out. This comes out 2 months after 9/11. So it barely gets a promotion. No, it's a $20 million budget. This is a small film intentionally. It's not really making an Oscar play even. It's just kind of it's a new Coen Brothers movie. It has famous people in it. You might enjoy it. That's about all they have as a sell on this film. It is, it's in black and white. It's and this main character, man. The most intentionally unsympathetic, difficult to empathize with person I think I've seen in film. Maybe it's
interesting.
It's kind of a great performance. But it's
it kind
also
of is, but we went on a lot about Barton Fink being such a difficult to sympathize with protagonist and deliberately unlikable. But that movie is much more alive and directly engaging.
Barton Fink is colorful, and so is the world he lives in, literally and figuratively.
And this is literally not a colorful film.
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes down to one, he referred to as, yes, they have a noir pot boiler as one of their modes, but to say that this pot boils is stretching it. It's the lowest simmer imaginable, and that seems to be so deliberate. Like that's.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not overly familiar with this flavor of noir. I'm much more in the Sam Spade kind of detectives, Venetian Blind. Those are the ones I'm familiar with. This is a whole corridor of these stories, which is, I guess, Double Indemnity would be, the kind of thing I'd point at as like the classic of this style, which is, sort of, hard luck people try to do a crime and everything goes wrong. Now that's a Coen Brothers staple, obviously, but this is a specific, this is like a tip of the cap to an older generation of that. There's not a lot of Fargo in here, even as we'll get to that.
Go ahead. No, I'll have my take on that, but go ahead.
There's the ransom extortion scheme. I feel
he's basically Jerry Lundegaard. Yeah,
right. I think they have very similar stories and similar main characters, except one of them is a bit more of an overt bumbling fool, and the other one is just with a stiff upper lip and perhaps an attempt to relate to that sort of Gary Cooper strong silent type. That is an interesting. I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around why the character's done this way, and if it's supposed to reflects a different take on or a different mood compared to like what main characters in Coen Brothers have done in the past. But from there, everything else feels very similar to Fargo, except it's certainly not Fargo in that way. Yeah.
Everything except for the tone, which kind of is a huge, and setting, which are
right. Exactly.
Such big parts of the identity of Fargo. I mean, one thing that we've talked about a few times here is that the Coen Brothers specialize in verbose idiots.
Yes.
So they're really challenging themselves by framing every scene of this movie around a protagonist who's very taciturn man of average intelligence, I would say.
Yeah.
And there's quite a bit of artistry in how they meet that challenge, I guess. But it's still just fundamentally inert compared to when they're just in their bag doing their thing. Like that's, I don't know, maybe a way like average intelligence is the hardest thing to write and portray. Like smart characters are interesting, dumb characters can be fun and amusing, and then he's so average that people don't even notice him.
Well, that averageness, that sort of normalness to this guy it seems like that would invite sort of a character that you want to empathize with, somebody that is an everyman that you can see yourself in or relate to in some way. And even this character doesn't even really empathize with himself. Like he
never becomes an underdog. That's that you're rooting for.
I mean, he makes like almost no choices aside from two in the whole film that I find problematic. One is the decision to extort his wife's lover, and then the other is to cozy up way too much to a young pianist, which is a whole thing I'm sure we're going to get to. But other than that, though, I feel like he's completely passive. And as we're talking, I recall that everyone else can't shut up in this film. And I wonder why. I mean, I wonder if is there some kind of self-critique going on with the Coen Brothers and how a lot of their main characters tend to be, rambling idiots. Instead, it's like, all right, I'm just going to observe the rambling idiot from afar and see how I feel about this. I'm not sure. I mean, I might be making a leap here, but I can't recall another film that's like this for the Coen Brothers, where especially an actor like Billy Bob Thornton, you can take him any direction you want, and instead going in this one, especially at the time when Billy Bob Thornton was kind of known to be crazy. This was a very different take. This is a very restrained Billy Bob Thornton for any respect.
I mean, I was saying, I kind of think he's excellent in this, but he is in service of what they want, which is that he is this stone wall. I'm often struck by just how well he photographs and how in control he is of, his instrument as an actor here. Mm-hmm. And I kind of love what he's doing, but it is in service of this choice that is kind of baffling to me. But it's also like the entire purpose of the film is that he is such a ghost, that he is just a person who doesn't exist in some, in a figurative way, I guess. I mean, it's right there in the title. Billy Bob
pulls that off. I mean, pretty well. I think for, like you said, it's a difficult performance where 65% of it has to come through smoking. Like that's all he gets to do, and he does it very well. But yeah, so like you said, in a way, this is a riff or a subversion of noir in a way, but kind of like The Big Lebowski was too. But that was a different type of noir story. It's a detective story, and that had a hook to it of sort of the dramatic question, I guess, is what if the Sam Spade figure in a noir mystery was a lazy stoner? And that premise, like the answer to that question is amusing. And it's funny, it's unique. And the dramatic question of this movie seems to be like, what if a man was completely uninterested in participating in his own life? And my knee-jerk reaction answer to that is, well, then nothing much, really. Like, that doesn't produce much of anything.
I mean, the decision to blackmail. I mean, well, frankly, the decision to get into the dry cleaning business by blackmailing is like proactive stuff. That is the act of somebody who is like bracing and buckling against his station in life, and you just don't see that. You know, he's just not doing that. Like, what does he want?
Yeah.
What is he after? You know,
I want to go back to that comment you made earlier. But sorry to interrupt you, John. But like, you made this comment about how he's unsympathetic, and and I critique him for that investment opportunity in Pursuit, but I also empathize with it very deeply. Right?
Interesting.
And I mean, this is a guy he's been a barber. He's a second tier barber in his own shop, right. He sends a second chair, and the most fascinating thing he says up to that point is the 9 different kinds of haircuts that he does, and they're all boring to me. And so when this comes along, I mean, it actually does. I mean, in a sense, like the guy is the sleaziest person you can think of to propose this to him. But he's
John Polito, yes.
like, right. And the character of Tall, it's just, this is all wrong. But I completely empathize with the seduction of wanting to go down that road. And yet it's also a move where in order to make that hell happen, he has to do something amoral, right? So forgive me for interrupting you, but it is, to me, this is like, that's the fundamental like inciting incident that launches like everything else. And it's such an interesting break from otherwise he's just cutting hair and sweeping up and being complicit in tolerating his wife's betrayals and all that. And I do want to get into the whole Frances McDormand of it all, which is every chapter of every Coen Brothers podcast, right?
Sure. Well, on paper, I think that's all there. Like we're saying, he's not unlike the William H. Macy character in Fargo in a lot of ways. That he is living a life of quiet desperation.
Yes,
but
it's so much quieter than Jerry Lundegaard's silent desperation.
He's not playing desperation. I don't know what his aim is. Like, I don't know what he wants.
He's not even really playing woundedness or vindictiveness, it could be a much more sympathetic decision than Jerry Lundegaard's, because if Jerry's wife had been cheating on him, the decision to fake this kidnapping to extort her father for money would be more inherently sympathetic. That he does it just because he doesn't want to grovel to them anymore.
Yeah, fuck Big Dave. You can. I mean, I think that we can. He's he's an asshole. He's sleeping with Jerry's wife, with Ed Crane's wife here. I don't feel sympathy for him. I think it's kind of ballsy and interesting that he makes the movie does. In the context of a film noir that I'm watching, I'm like, yeah, go for it, Ed Crane. It is a decision that ruins everyone's life, of course.
But I do find the scene where Big Dave is going to Ed Crane to elicit sympathy from him because he's been caught for cheating on, like, what is going on in Big Dave's mind at this point? I mean, and to me, there's this grand theme throughout the whole film that must be addressed, which is the theme of emasculation, of like how Ed Crane is. It's like the ongoing. It's like this undercurrent of motivation that, in order to understand this film, for me, you have to understand that like Ed Crane is a fundamentally emasculated man, and Frances McDormand's entire performance vis-a-vis him is like speaks to that, down to the symbolism of shaving legs, to to me, Big Dave's entire character and what he represents, and at least the facade that he puts out there. But that scene, to me, as I was watching, I was like, this guy knows he's screwing this guy's wife, and yet he's going to this guy for sympathy about getting caught over the situation.
They seem to have no relationship at all, right? I mean,
why would anybody confide in this guy?
Right? Does he pity him that much, like to like, or have no respect for him whatsoever to like know that he probably doesn't know, he doesn't even care or what have you, and or probably just doesn't know. But
yeah, not even pity,
know.
but just dismiss him so much that
right, exactly, yeah.
Or does he do it because he's trying to probe what? Does he suspect Ed already and is trying to figure out?
I think that's definitely it. Like he doesn't know for a fact. He just has a hunch that is correct. You know, a husband knows, as he says, but he doesn't actually have any proof. He just kind of figures it makes sense.
Just seems like
no, I mean, it's Big Dave going to Ed because he thinks Ed's a suspect, but he doesn't know, and he's trying to get Ed to react to something. Of course, good luck with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like maybe because in the subsequent scene where like Big Dave confronts Ed, I wonder if it plays better with the presumption that Big Dave approaches Ed as if he doesn't suspect him, as if he just thinks like, hey man, like he sees him as one of the most pathetic people out there. He's telling him to buy better suits. He's just telling him to do this and that. And all his interactions with him are about like how he's just not a man, which, you know, ties into the whole theme. Right. So to me, the scene of their confrontation hits harder when, and the question that comes up over and over, which is like, what kind of a man are you? Which is this fun rhetorical motif that happens throughout the film. So I don't know if what's right or wrong here. But I do know like that whatever's happening it's certainly a play on like what kind of manliness that each of them are enacting in those moments.
Well, Big Dave, I mean, played by James Gandolfini, you know, right in the middle of Sopranos here. So,
right.
You know, this is just an avatar of malevolent masculinity, essentially.
Fair enough.
And he is. I mean, I get the sense that he's not suspecting Ed Crane in that first scene, just because I think that's how Gandolfini's playing it. The idea occurred to me, but I think I
actually agree with you. Like the version I put out there, like makes more sense to me on paper, and then the way Gandolfini was playing it, I think is the other way.
Yeah, well, he's just a myopic dude, you know, like he can't kind of see beyond his own sphere of experience and what he is. I mean, he's definitely sleeping with Ed Crane's wife here, but I still don't have the connector as why he approaches Ed Crane on this. Beyond maybe he's just he recognizes him as somebody he can bounce ideas off of, you know, because he's such a blank slate.
He's a tree trunk he can whisper his secrets into, because he's like, Ed is not going to talk no matter what, and nobody's going to listen to him even if he did. And I think that's sort of what Lee was getting at.
Right. I mean, gosh, sorry. Like every time I think of those tree trunks, I go right to In the Mood for Love, and that's just not relevant to this podcast for now. I want to certainly talk about Frances McDormand's character and how I have a sort of certain perception of Frances McDormand. I think especially I just locked in Fargo, and that's just been her forever for me.
Right.
I mean, I hope it's not inappropriate to say. I think she's stunning in this film. She kind of swoops in as a total prototypical stepward wife, which is an interesting mode for her. But she's a brilliant actress, fulfills it well, and then just constantly belittles in a sort of microaggressive way Ed's character. From everything from just the way that he talks about him, the way that he's commanding him around, and he's totally complicit to it. And then contrast that with her actions with Big Dave. To me, understanding his motivations in that like deliberately passive way is one of the most necessary aspects of understanding this film, and about the energies that he's exuding throughout. I'm
also still probably more sympathetic to Doris in this movie than about anybody else. She's constantly emasculating him and all that, I suppose, but it's also like, well, how else are you supposed to interact with this guy? Like,
I have a kicker on that one though, but go ahead.
No, just like you have to lead him by the nose everywhere, because you won't do anything. He'll just smoke another cigarette. staring off into the middle distance if you leave him to his own devices.
Well, that was a part of the appeal from the beginning, I believe. Like, there was
It would have to have been
right because she liked him because he doesn't talk much, like he doesn't do much, and that was a big part of her appeal, right?
Yeah, I mean, her brother won't shut up, right? So
exactly. So I wanted to start to go all the way to the end for when it comes to Doris, but there was something that really stood out to me, and maybe this is just an interpretation of chronology. Of course, Doris makes a terrible choice at the end to take her own life, but she makes that choice not because of Ed. She made the choice after realizing that Big Dave is a fraud. And that to me was really striking. And
she's carrying his child.
Yeah, and realizes she's pregnant. It's not clear when she knew that.
And to me, that's so striking. And like, I mean, I don't know, if I were Ed, I'd be truly devastated by those facts. Because throughout this whole situation, Ed, in maybe his own way, is suffering, right? But it doesn't seem to register that much in her sense of guilt. Or maybe she doesn't really have much of one at that point. But in knowing that, like, it was really her last scene in the film is when she calls Big Dave a dope for being a total fraud about his war service and all those things. That's why I have it, like, I'm not to mean to start an argument, but like, I have trouble when it comes to even sympathizing with Doris in this mode, because it's as if like her move to do that was more driven from a sense of shame and embarrassment rather than any sort of sadness or guilt towards her husband.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
Yeah, I'm still wrestling with this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, the Coens, this is how they operate. They're not going to give you a, line in black letter text to explain that explicitly. But another interpretation of it is she offs herself when Freddie Riedenschneider might have finally hit on a winning strategy. And it's the prospect of going back to being married to Ed that actually pushes her over the edge. That's even darker one.
Yeah, that's really dark too.
That's interesting. My take on this was actually that she has the life of quiet desperation that we that is to be imposed on Ed. Like she's incredibly sad in this film. Like everything she does is just a person who is miserable. The alcoholism, the affairs, all of it is just points to a person who is deeply unhappy. And part of that is going to be married to Ed Crane, sure. But it does feel like it's a little bit of that person who's just like, this is not the life I was meant for kind of thing. And any escape from that. And then to have that, the reveal that the person that she trusted, Big Dave, ends up being a complete fraud. This also comes after Ed offers to take the fall for her. For, admitting what he actually did, but sort of under the guise as a legal strategy. So she sees him do that as well. We don't get inside her head at all. So it's not clear whether she's, seeing him sacrifice it all for her and thinking it is an act of sacrifice, or if she's piecing together what he did, that he killed Big Dave. It's unclear in the context of the film what that is, because Ed doesn't know. Right. And that's just sort of one of the haunting things about his relationship with Doris in this. It's not clear. He doesn't know. He can't ever really know.
Well, I think she definitely knows he's telling the truth about killing him.
You think so?
In the performance, and it comes across that way. And maybe it's, I guess so much of this movie is deliberately working at odds against what the sort of dramatic momentum would tell you should be happening. But it's also like, well, yeah, but why would you write this scene in a way where she doesn't know? Like, it's the only way there's anything going on in this scene is if she is taking it in and realizing it. And I guess that does allow it for it to be kind of all the things that we talked about when she kills herself, that she realizes not only that like Big Dave's a fraud, Ed knows that I betrayed him and killed him with it. And so now like her reaching outside of the quiet desperation of her marriage, has gone up in flames because Big Dave is dead and Ed killed him. And she'll also like, yes, she's always at least been the mover in that household, but she now will like not even have moral high ground on him in any sense. Like she'll have to go back and be, penitent as having been caught out while also resenting him for killing the guy.
Would she with Ed, though? I mean, would that not result in basically the same reaction as not doing that with Ed?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah. I mean, their relationship has been, I mean, it's not like an explicit, like traditional, domestic, situation where you see a lot of arguments. It's more of like this passive, like quiet burn, but you definitely can sense the tension there.
What's the unhappiness? They're both unhappy in different ways.
They're very unhappy. Yeah, exactly. And the big problem is they have an utter inability to communicate about it. And so, you know, these things play out the way they do. Yeah. I mean, it's deeply tragic. And, at the same time, like, I mean, it's the quick instinct is for us to try to assign blame and reason to a lot of it. And a lot of it really just boils down to, like, well, you have people who are completely different from each other that assume they were looking for the differences in one another rather than what everyone should look for, which is, something a bit more like stable, which you're not really educated to do in the 1950s. So
arguably more, you were more educated to do that in the past than in the present. That now conventions have become such that we are taught that we should only ever be with our one true love, and that soulmate, sure. And it should be, and you should remain passionate in your marriage throughout decades and kids and everything else,
or quietly tolerant or any malfeasance that happens.
And you should,
right.
You should not just have a job that you check in and out of and, make it an okay living at Second Chair Barber. You should be pursuing your passion in your work and getting compensated for it, beyond your wildest dreams. And that, I don't know if all that was the same in the 50s exactly, but it seems obvious that whatever Ed and Dora settled for was wrong for both of them. I think what's more important than, there's different schools of thought. Do opposites attract? Or are you better off with somebody like you? But I think what you need in a partner more than anything is understanding. Mm-hmm. Like, my wife doesn't have to be like me exactly. It's important that she understands me and accepts me. And there is not a lot of understanding between them.
Right. Or within them. Right. Like, I mean, that's the great question of what Ed really knows about himself and is constantly interrogated from end to end when it comes to the film. And so, yeah, I would say that energy plays out almost with all the characters. And there's one aspect of this that really still intrigues me to this day, which is Big Dave's wife.
Oh my,
I love her scene.
And to me, when I'm reminded that I'm watching a Coen Brothers film, it's when characters like this exist.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think there's a lot to rationalize perhaps as vis-a-vis Big Dave and his whole dynamic and all, but it just takes it to another dimension all the way to the end of the film, which I love. But I think it's important to address this.
Well, there's, we talk a lot about nihilism with the Coen brothers. That is a word that gets applied to them a lot. And in a way, like the Ed Crane character, like this is nihilism personified. Mm-hmm. This is somebody that doesn't even know if they care if their wife is cheating on them or not.
Except he's not entirely written that way. Like he plays it that way. The movie views him in that sense, but he's making moves.
But does he just make the bare minimum number of moves in order to make
like
the script happen? Like for there to be anything at all happening in this, in this movie whatsoever. I mean, it's so much like, again, he's in every scene of this movie. So much of it comes down to, I think, scene by scene. Maybe that's why I don't like it as much as some of the other ones. Like the Coen brothers scene work is usually really strong, even in some of their lesser ones. We'll get to Intolerable Cruelty next time. And I just love so many of the scenes in that movie, even though it doesn't cohere as well as some of the other ones. But this one, he is such an inert figure that it really is. You need your Politos and Gandolfinis, and Michael Badalucco is also really good in this. But you need these big fat guys to come and bring this movie to life, just in moment to moment. And Tony Shalhoub, we should talk about Tony Shalhoub a lot too.
Oh, he's the standout for me. Yeah,
yeah. The Big Dave's wife role, she is not as verbose as those big fat guys, but just the wideness of her eyes
alone. Her eyes, like.
Well, Roger Deakins shoots the hell out of this, and there's some images that are incredible and indelible and wonderful, and almost feel like they're grasping for a bit of more importance almost sometimes when this is sort of deliberately low key and low. I don't want to say low energy. No,
I think it's absolutely low energy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean that pejoratively, but maybe like aesthetically. But Big Dave's wife on the porch, in the morning veil, and her eyes just pop. Incredible stuff, and it's the shots like this throughout the film.
They pop some like there's a David Lynch vibe to that scene. It feels straight out of
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's like going into it like, oh, this is that film noir moment where like the widow is about to like propose another position or job or what have you, and it goes nowhere in that direction.
or accuse him of something,
Right. And I'm just gonna, after that scene, I'm like, this is definitely going to be mentioned later in the podcast, but like, but it was wild. And but even prior to there's this added dimension to her where it's really confusing as to what's happening between them, because I mean that's an example of another marriage that probably isn't working out, but you've seen versions of this where like I think of American Beauty and Chris Cooper's marriage to Allison Janney, right? And how that to me it's a pretty horrific situation when you kind of dig a little bit into that. I don't necessarily believe that that's a proper analogy, but you've got one big, say malevolent masculine presence in Big Dave, and then this woman like who's literally spaced out. I wonder if there's some, if that's just Coen Brothers being a little bit quirky to remind everyone what film they're watching, or if that's actually like based or embedded in some sort of certain kind of reality amongst wives who are, did she start to indulge in conspiracy theories in order to find meaning in her life at that point, right?
Well, this is going back to the sort of masculinity conversation. I mean, this is a fiction she has created to explain Big Dave's impotence, or at least his lack of sexual interest in her. I mean, we know he's not impotent; he's impregnated Doris, but like the spice is gone from the marriage. They're not making love anymore, and she's got an alien conspiracy to explain it, and to explain his death and all the things that happened afterwards. It's crazy. It's crazy stuff.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about in this series the Coen brothers' relationship to sort of the truth, and we call it the secret plumbing of the universe is what I've been calling it ever since the end of Blood Simple. And Ed will talk about the maze of his life at the end of this movie and the closing voiceover that kind of gets at that too. But this is her; she has to invent her own plumbing to try and make sense of her world in a way that is more fanciful but less emotionally devastating to her than the sort of plainer, simple idea that her husband doesn't really love her.
I mean, that's kind of just what conspiracy theories are, I guess, when you boil them down for the most part. Filling some sort of need that isn't necessarily conscious.
Resolution.
Yeah. I mean, maybe even Bigfoot. You could figure that one out. I don't know.
Well,
that's a real thing in Oregon, by the way. We don't mess around. That's a real thing. That's science around here.
The last episode, as we're recording this, the last episode we released was about sort of how we want our kids to watch or engage with TV and movies and all that. And we talked a lot in that about people being story-driven creatures. And I think that's very true as far as conspiracy theories go. And it, in a way, I think it's very central to the whole purpose of drama as a form. It's the main purpose of drama, no matter what specific theme you're trying to tackle, I think, is to explain change to our lizard-brained minds that have trouble understanding why it was dark earlier and it's light now. And a fictional narrative is a step-by-step process of explaining how, this is what a character arc is, I suppose. It's explaining how someone who started at point A ended up at point Z. And conspiracy theories, I think, are that too. It's when people can't understand how a thing could be the way it is, and they need a story that walks them from point A, which is how they think the world should be, versus to point B, which is the world as they experience it.
Well, even the dumbest superhero story is a parable to somebody, in some fashion or another. Black Adam is, it's teaching somebody how to deal with something. That's just the nature of filmed entertainment or stories, I suppose.
But stories, yeah. I'm lumping conspiracy theories in with stories generally.
No, that's what they are, right? Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, this movie comes out in 2001. This is like kind of in the back half of X-Files, so there is like a cultural context for aliens and UFOs that is not present now per se. When we
because
think
they're
of
real.
conspiracy theories now, it means something else. But,
Sorry, it's just, I didn't mean to
no.
spoil, but no, we all know now, and we're somehow calm about it that UFOs are totally real. Anyway, I with that context, that's actually very helpful too, because I remember a time where this was like, I mean, there's something playful about it, but I think that helps a lot when it comes to that dynamic. I initially thought when she approached the porch that she was going to proposition him or something, and they were going to get into some really elaborate thing. And
it's almost a relief when it's just, aliens?
Yeah,
That's what you hear about?
That's somehow better than just, okay, let's add a little bit necessary attention to this as well and overcomplicate our lives. Cool. Well, I mean, that helps a lot, actually, in terms of how I process that whole thing.
Well, I mean, it's still there. I mean, there's a UFO at the end of this movie,
There is.
It's still,
Or is there?
it's in the hopper.
Is it just a dream?
there's not.
Is it a dream
Right.
sequence?
It's a dream sequence. He's walking around an empty prison. So yeah, it's
Yeah. Which I guess, sure, the aliens could have kidnapped everybody.
Oh,
I
God.
don't, but yeah, I think the Coen brothers are too prone to ending their movies with dream sequences or dream recountings or ending in a dream state that for me to take that as literal.
This is like their most restrained film ever, and they can't restrain themselves when it comes to just being themselves. Cool.
Well, if I had written 100 pages of this screenplay, I might be a little bored at this point too. And want to indulge some fancifulness, I guess. But maybe we just track other things like that. This is very much a Coen brothers movie, even though as I don't think it demonstrates all their strengths to their strongest degree. But there are a lot of through lines here. The Big Day character to me felt very similar to the Big Lebowski in terms of their fraudulence of their masculinity and like the myth of themselves that they put forward to the world as a self-made man. I guess it's as a businessman in the Lebowski's case, and both as a businessman and a soldier in Big Dave's case.
It's interesting to me that they cast Gandolfini and not Goodman in this role, because Goodman feels like their guy to play this kind of role.
Yeah,
but
he played Big Dan in the prior movie.
He did, yes. But like, there's a sexiness to Gandolfini, I think, that helps. Even as a large man.
I don't know why.
Yeah,
I find him vaguely. I'm not even attracted to most.
It's unmissable.
But there's. But I what I love about Gandolfini in general as an actor is that, like, to me, he has a very distinct voice and a very distinct energy, and you think you're watching Tony Soprano, but it's almost like if Tony Soprano went to get his MFA and then do whatever role. That's how I feel when I watch Gandolfini in any other roles. Like, it's Tony Soprano, but a really
if he had done more than a semester and a half in community college.
Exactly. You never had the makings of a varsity athlete. It's just one of those things.
Big Dave apparently never did either.
This is very Tony Soprano. This might be the most Tony Soprano performance he's given outside of The Sopranos, I think. I mean, probably because it's like right in the heart of it. He's just becoming an icon when this comes out.
Yeah, so maybe he's just still got some of those mannerisms and whatnot that are deeply embedded in him.
I think one of the big graces of this film is that it's got really great characters. That all, like, to me, they're a bit daring and just odd in their own way. Like, actually, even now when I forget one of you brought up the David Lynch like comparison, that there are some characters that are doing David Lynchy kind of things that might not translate into this is going to end up in your dreams and backwards, whatever. But it's like, why are you doing that? And it's not fully explained, right? The first character I'm amazed that we haven't talked about yet is Crichton Tolliver, and the dry cleaning salesman who really comes in like a boulder of energy into this whole film. And I remember, I think I saw this when I was in my teens, and so my perspectives on like sexual orientations evolved a lot since then, but there was something very reactionary about this character and how they played out from there. Yeah. I mean, it's very quick, but it's like it was just fascinating to me. He just goes and goes and goes. He's like chasing one adrenaline rush after another. But
he's such a polar opposite to Ed Crane.
Yes,
in that,
very much so.
in that way,
Yeah.
which I guess it makes him a good catalyst for something to happen in this movie.
Crane's a barber and he has fake hair. Like that was already an indication that this is going to be a big difference, right?
Not a good match for
Quite a
us.
toupee movie, by the way. Is there anyone in this that doesn't wear a toupee? Maybe Badaluca's got his own hair in this. It's just a side note.
I don't have.
There's a lot of
much
fake
an
hair
eye
in
for
this
that.
movie.
But that is something that would have to be deliberate. Like they're concerned about hair as this organic thing. I mean, some of the most expressive Billy Bob ever gets is giving this little monologue about what happens to hair when you cut it off and how it keeps growing.
I was really stuck on that. I was like, is this what the movie's about? What's going on? I was trying to figure out. And I guess it was just that it's, I mean, what I came down to is that this is sort of a futile job, in a sense. It's just this maddening kind of, you can
Sisyphean, I suppose.
Yeah.
Very existential crisis moment, right?
Right. Well, I mean, the whole thing is sort of an existential crisis.
Yeah. It could have made more sense if it came earlier in that scene before all this, but I guess it came out when it did, right? Perhaps as he's struggling with the idea too of entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, it's the Coen brothers. Like they know what they're doing, certainly by this point. And so I find that everything in here is very deliberate, even the stuff that might escape me as to exactly why. I just don't know. Like, I've given this a couple of watches now, a couple of good tries. I usually can come up with some, some theory of the case on what a movie's doing and why it's about. And there's a lot in this one that still leads me. I mean, the stuff that comes through, I think, even more than the masculinity stuff or hair stuff, is the uncertainty principle stuff that Freddie Redenschneider brings to the table. And that's stuff that we'll see in other movies.
Dude, when he came out and just started to talk about the uncertainty principle, I was just like, "Oh my god, it's Al's thing! It's the through line of the Coen brothers that we've been talking about. This is, you can't observe a thing. You knowing about something does not help you. It's
yeah. I don't think it might be a stretch to call it my thing. I think with respects to Werner Heisenberg, but Shalhoub is incredible in this too.
He's so much fun. I mean, this is kind of like, you enjoy having a Coen Brothers character in your Coen Brothers movie. Here's the most, here's a guy who's going to fast talk and have a real command of dialogue and a lot of wit and observational kind of cleverness. And he's going to say things that are memorable.
And a philosophy underneath it.
And
I mean, he's despising that uncertainty principle stuff. It's very philosophical stuff. He's doing it for like very, sort of small ends, trying to reach it's
almost the Chewbacca defense from South Park. It's just straight up like, well, if you never really know, you can't really know, right? And it's kind of overwhelming people with rhetoric is sort of his deal.
There's a whole class aspect to him, right? Like right from the onset, the way that he orders, the kind of food he eats, how gluttonous he is, and I mean, there's something fanciful about that. And there's this big thing about, he's this fancy man from Sacramento that, I mean, forgive me, I'm not that impressed by that as someone who doesn't live in Northern California. And Tony Shalhoub, it's strange because I've seen many an episode of Monk and I have a certain impression of him from there. But I'm very aware that he's a wizard of an actor. And so there is something, there's a lot of, it's fascinating how many ways you can contrast one's character with Ed Crane, and this was yet another version of that. I felt like I was really hoping that there would be some sentimentality about him, but no, he's kind of devoid of that by the end of it.
No, he's just a shark. He takes his house towards the
right,
end.
Exactly. I'd say there's these interesting, one character I think this gets overlooked a lot is Richard Jennings' father, or who plays ScarJo's father. He's only in like a couple of scenes, but this time around, I completely forgot about him in the first time I saw it. This time around, he just resonated because he's like really gassy in his or something, or there's something really off.
It's a choice, right?
This is an example of like what is happening with this character, who is quite pivotal when it comes to introducing him to Freddie Redenschneider and also being and being Birdie's father and permitting perhaps a lot of energies that shouldn't be happening around a young girl. But there's just something strange about him, and there's not enough light to really address. Okay, can we go back to why this guy is constantly passing out? And I mean, it could be just alcoholism, it could be something else, but it's not normal to me.
Some great drunk acting in this film, man.
Sure, fair enough.
I mean, Francis McDormand at the party is really good drunk acting, but man, he is so excellent on that porch scene. That's some great drunk acting. I loved him in that.
Yes.
He's a fantastic actor, of course. So
the thing I zeroed in on with him more than alcoholism was that his deal is that he is very into genealogy and is always spending spare time looking up things in the library, I guess. I mean, it's an aside that you just didn't need to include, but he's looking backwards into the past, trying to find some secret plumbing there that's going to explain life to him. And you know, the widow is looking somewhere else.
Yeah. Is he and his wife no longer together? Is there another sort of like dissolved marriage and kind of situation?
Unclear to be.
I presumed it to be a widower just because she never was mentioned at all, but I don't.
Yeah.
I mean,
because I don't understand Birdie's relationship with him seems to be very loyal and sweet. But I was just curious as to what possible variables we can add to that.
Well, Birdie.
I don't know. It was just bizarre to me. I mean, I've seen many a drunk people, but like it was just something about Richard Jennings is just dead staring through, Eddie's eyes, and it just stuck with me. I don't know why. Why.
The impression I got is that's a guy who's good at being drunk. Like he can be more lucid than he can be more drunk than he lets on. He's actually quite wasted in that scene, and is still able to kind of keep track of the conversation and follow it. But if you're watching,
slowly.
he's done. Yeah,
he's not standing up.
No,
fair enough.
Should we stand on Freddie or talk about Birdie next? I suppose.
Let's talk about Birdie. She's right there.
Okay,
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
This is the thing. Like Scarlett Johansson, also a very reserved actor. Kind of understated. She doesn't do a lot of screaming and yelling. And so when she is playing off Ed Crane in this, there is just, these are just kind of dead scenes to me. Like nothing is going on really until
I think she's good
until they're in the car and she's going for it. But the other thing that felt great, that the piano teacher scene where he dismisses her so completely that she might make an excellent typist. That feels very similar to the cruel dismissal of Llewyn Davis by F. Murray Abraham in that movie. Like, except that
I don't
the
see
difference
any money here. Yeah.
Well, the French guy is saying she's technically proficient, but lacks the soul of an artist, and Abraham is saying, "Oh, you have the soul of an artist, all right. You're just never going to be successful at it." Which is almost worse.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, Scarlett Johansson, Birdie doesn't care. She's not actually interested in this.
It's kind of like, sorry to interrupt you, John. It's kind of like the Citizen Kane ending where the second wife is really being forced into a certain form of legitimacy. It's like, and I perceive that entire scene of like, it's pretty clear that Ed Crane's attracted to Birdie. And there's a lot of wrong there. And there's a lot of like his own reservation that prevents that from being articulated in a certain way, but it's so obvious, right? That the best thing he can do is to give her a career and presumably give her what she wants, which she never really says it. She's just playing the piano in a room randomly and somehow makes that he's forcing that entire identity on her, right?
Yes. This is a weird thing for me. Like this is so at odds with who it feels like Ed Crane has been in the film. But I think that it maybe is the key to figuring him out. Maybe is what need is this filling? What is he doing here? What does he actually want from her? And it's not sex in a way that he is like conscious of. He doesn't want to have sex with her.
Right. I think he's probably asexual anyway. Like, he says he hasn't done it with his wife in years. And he, even when she is the aggressor in the car there, like it's the most Ed Crane thing to do would be go, oh, gee,
oh, geez, Louise. Oh, no.
Geez, Louise, Birdie. Yeah. But not do anything like to let it happen is the most Ed Crane thing of all. And he does actually stop it in front of me. He does like resist it more. It's one of his more active points in the movie is to actually try and push her away. So I don't think it's just straight up perving on it. I think it's something more symbolic.
Right. I don't want to make that assumption as well. It's not. I do think there's some it's like not a sexual attraction, but like there is an attraction. There is some perhaps desire for companionship, but and is it
and
as
youth
simple
and beauty
as,
are tied in there,
right? Is it as simple as that? It's
sexual,
I mean, Scarlett Johansson, I think she's 15 in this scene, and it's like there's and that's maybe in like, but she, at this time she had like this Natalie Portman-esque like soul of an older person and really complicated a lot of people. For me, I mean, she's the same age as me, so I have no qualms. But like,
I think she said Lost in Translation the same year.
Yeah, and that's a whole thing, right? But
similar actually. Yeah.
But I do find like the way that
you know Bill Murray? They wanted Bill Murray to play Ed Crane.
Interesting.
Oh. Yeah.
Now that changes.
He's good at smoking.
He is, and we know retroactively that he would be good at just a muted performance too.
Yeah, he's done this character in like Broken Flowers and stuff. He can do this. I kind of think Billy Bob's perfect for what they want.
Yeah, I think everybody came out better with him landing in Lost in Translation.
Right.
Yeah. There's something about like, no worries. No, I mean, I always just to build on what you were just saying though. I do like when Billy Bob Thornton gets into like sort of like a conservative look mode, like he had it in Love Actually playing the president, and he has a similar look in this film. There's something about that like furrowed brow archetype that I think works well in this. That maybe someone like Bill Murray, there's like the expectation like, hey man, be funny, you're Bill Murray, and like I think it works a lot better in Lost in Translation because everyone's like, hey Bob Harris, like you're amazing. I'm like, yeah,
oh absolutely,
right. But I'm really trying to wrestle with my thought here. I'm just threading a thin line of just like what's happening between these two, especially when like she's introduced kind of like as he's wandering away from that that was it Nerdlingers?
Nerdlinger.
What a
Great
ridiculous
name,
name
by
for a department. Yeah, okay. He's wandering away, and then
it's a reference to Double Indemnity or something. According to what I read.
Now I feel dumb. Thank you. But like in that, like it's just kind of random, and we can try to add poetry to it and say, oh, like he's looking for something sweet and innocent away from what all these parasitic like department store retail people are doing. And if
no,
that's
it definitely feels wrong.
Yeah,
there's definitely like some sort of Lolita thing going on here.
Right. And I mean, it becomes more pronounced when this actually probably the most uncomfortable scene aside from what's in the car is when he goes into her room and she's just on her bed and they're talking. And I'm not good with that. Like, I don't think like like a 50-some-year-old man should be just wandering into a teenage girl's room and nobody seems to bat an eye. But
her father says she's upstairs. Like,
yeah, and like the drunk father's like, I mean, like, but
I also don't think he's drunk, and I don't think he's necessarily neglectful there or like wrong to dismiss the threat that Ed Crane presents because he doesn't present. Like in the way that Big Dave might have been wrong to dismiss him in that way.
That's a fair point. I think that's a fair point where like no one really sees him as a threat. Like he's if it was Big Dave, it would probably be a bit more of an issue. But like, and so
but he's the man who wasn't there, so he's not there even when he's there.
Right. So I mean, I guess in a way, I'm still trying to wrestle my mind around what is essentially like the third act of what is supposed to be a relationship or tension in this film, and there's a part of me that like maybe because I just have a perpetual crush on Scarlett Johansson, then it's fine. But like, but I don't know how it carefully inserts and like builds on what's happening here and what and his intentions here are like with the dry cleaning was much more clear to me. It's just economic motivation and just fulfilling that sense of masculinity and that ability to provide. Here, I don't know. I want to almost challenge whether maybe it's not sexual, but there is this type of companionship that he's looking for, but perhaps identifies with because she's not exactly the most articulate person either. She just communicates via her piano, and like otherwise she's a bit as laconic as he is. Right? I'm spitballing at this point.
There's something still a little predatory about it, even if his designs are not really sexual, strictly speaking. He still wants to use her and sort of be a parasite of a form to her.
She's not into piano. That's something he's imposing on her essentially because he saw her playing piano.
Well, in the department store when he first walks up to her, he says, "Did you write that?" And she said, "No, it's Beethoven." Like that's how little he understands about classical music, and he's already projecting onto her more interest and more aptitude than she actually has.
Yeah.
But why?
But I think when we look at
what's
it,
the
like
point?
why this? Well, I think maybe like he's grasping at something.
Is it loneliness? Is it just he needs a project, something to
Yes.
do in his
And
existence?
he's trying to answer, what kind of man am I?
Right.
I think the dry cleaning is one option.
I
And
actually
this
like
other
the way
thing
you
is-
just articulated it, though. Like, because the dry cleaning thing kind of fell through at that point, right? Or is it maybe
Right.
in a murky state? Like, the fact that you said he needs a project, to me, speaks to perhaps what is the core of this. He needs a purpose. And it's a weird purpose, but it's like, I mean, maybe it's not. Like, as someone who's, I've coached youth basketball and things like that, like, and I teach children all the time, like, it's very easy to identify what a kid needs and having the ability to provide that if necessary. I want to assert that dynamic is very different than what's going on with these two. But and I'm trying to think of, is there like an allegory or maybe perhaps another like film analogy where something like this takes place, where it's like this older mentor character.
Well,
I mean, is that the kind of thing that's
Lolita.
happening that just goes awry? Aside from Lolita, of course. Lolita's kind of the combo breaker here, man. Like, I'm trying to find something else that's a bit more innocuous, but maybe I'm batting zero.
Well, if the existential crisis that he's facing in this movie is, what kind of man am I? And he's sort of, maybe even grasping is too active of a word for it, but he's poking his groundhog head out at different things and saying, maybe I'm a businessman with this dry cleaning thing.
Preferably speaking,
And that
okay.
doesn't work. And then he walks in on her playing piano. I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm Eric Roberts in Star 80.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, maybe I'm Eric Robertson, Star 80.
Maybe
If I had a nickel
that's
for every
exactly
time.
what his thought process is. I don't even know what Beethoven is, but man, I'm ready to be a patron of the arts. Yes.
Something that cracks me up is the way Scarlett Johansson kind of defines him, is that she says, "Oh, I know, you're an enthusiast," and it's like, that's the last thing he is.
Exactly. That's a funny line.
Yeah.
The final thing, I guess, I mean, I think we got to return to the uncertainty principle, because it seems like that's where it ends.
I think that's a
here.
natural thing to return to, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so his final voiceover as he's going out of in the dream sequence, I guess, to go look at the UFO is, well, it's like pulling away from the maze. While you're in the maze, you go through it willy-nilly, turning where you think you have to turn, banging into dead ends, one thing after another. But you get some distance on it, and all those twists and turns, why, they're the shape of your life. It's hard to explain, but seeing it whole gives you some peace. And I don't know that I really got a lot of peace from this performance or from this story necessarily, but that ties into, I guess, what I was yammering about earlier about how this is what all stories provide, is a wider perspective than we get from our own eyeballs that gives us some peace to see how things move from point A to point B to point C. And it makes some sense of things. And the Coen brothers, I think, are skeptical of that. That's why there's so much of the uncertainty principle here and in all their movies. There's so many lines here. Freddie telling him, "I'm an attorney, you're a barber, you don't know anything," and the widow saying, "Sometimes knowledge is a curse," because she thinks. I mean, we can take that her.
Do you
her
think
alien
there's a
experience is
morale
literal.
to this? Like, I mean, are we going to go to that direction? Like,
I think
I don't think so.
yeah,
I think the moral is to be skeptical of morals in a way.
I mean, there's something dangerous about, like, I would agree with that, in that there's something dangerous about the way that the film articulates people who should play the game and people who should not, right? Like, perhaps people who should jump into the maze and people who don't belong in the maze. I'm just, again, not sure if I believe in this, but there are a lot of people, right? Go ahead.
Well, I think we're all stuck in the maze, but I think, what you're hitting on there is something that struck me here, is that there's a deep skepticism here to, yes, Ed is somebody living quiet desperation, and storytelling would dictate to us that he needs to become proactive to improve his lot in life. And all of this does kind of serve like, yes, when he does finally make choices, everything gets worse for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
That's, I mean, when I'm looking at this as a noir pastiche, then well, of course, that's what happens to a noir protagonist. That's what's supposed to happen. That is his purpose, essentially. If you take it as a larger statement on human beings, then we're in denialism territory again. This movie essentially becomes stay in your lane. And if your lane is you're the second chair barber, tough shit, man. That's your lot in life.
Well, but I think what's more challenging about it is that it fully acknowledges that your lane sucks.
Yeah.
Like, it's not saying you'll be happy. That there's not like, well, somebody like Big Dave or somebody who knows who he is and is happy in this simple life. I don't know. We're not to a serious man yet, but there's no rabbi who's happy just like reveling in the beauty of the parking lot. In this one. Maybe Richard Jenkins. I don't know. Like, is he the happiest with his lot of everybody?
There's not a lot of happy characters in this movie. I miss Freddie Riedenschneider probably, just because he's
that's true.
A bit of a rich hedonist. You know, he worked the system. He's a person who thrives in this world.
Michael Badalucco to begin with, but not by the end.
Not by the end. Nope.
The French pianist. I don't know. Like,
the French pianist seems to really like his setup there.
This to me, it speaks to like those two people, like Freddie Riedenschneider and I'm going to try to say his name. Is it Jacques Coen-Oscopy? I totally butchered that. Whatever. But they're people who almost like it's. And again, gets me really cynical, right? Where the only people who are truly happy in this kind of system are the people who are just like who are flying high from the get go and flew high by reputation, and there are those who are desperately trying to claw their ways up there. And at some point, we can start to see a little bit of sympathy, even with Big Dave, one could say, because he was like, "Oh, we're going to be opening up this new store. It's going to be this great thing." Blah blah blah. And he's unapologetically
he is a liar,
that, right?
He's
a liar, right?
He's like presenting the person he wishes he was.
Right. It's like there's just sprinkles of madmanness all over this, but it's just a little bit less glamorous and fun. And with that, it's like, so what do we do? And I think if we're coming back to the uncertainty principle and thinking about if there is a moral to all this, which I'm almost hesitant to even propose because it just makes me sad. To like, what if could Ed Crane been just fine if he just accepted his lot in life and then we had no movie, or even not to mess around with a 15-year-old. I mean, that seems obvious to me. It's like, nice, thank you for I think it's Beethoven, great, okay, I'll see you later, and like just let that be the narrative there rather than to opt in hard and I'm gonna make a career out of you. Is there a critique of personal ambition or inquiry or seeing the potential in things, especially when we look at the whole situation? There are all these unstable things happening that are barely holding themselves together, and if that isn't like, at least my own perspective on what life was like in the 1950s, I don't know what is. But
well, it's again, I don't necessarily come away thinking that. Well, Ed Crane doesn't seem at the end to have a lot of regrets as a character. Of like, if only I had learned to love being a barber. That
wouldn't have made him happy. That wouldn't have solved his problem. It's such as it is. He has a beautiful last line actually. In voiceover, which is where 90% of his dialogue is. What is it? It's something about seeing Doris in the afterlife.
Maybe I'll see Doris there and tell her all the things we don't have words for here.
That's kind of beautiful. That's kind of a lovely final sentiment. I don't know though. Are he and Doris really going to have that much to talk about in the afterlife? I mean,
that's the thing. We don't get the sense that he's got more to say.
He may not, but he feels unable to communicate. Though is the thing. Like he can't express whatever it is that's inside him, and not even to himself. And that's why I say he's unsympathetic in a way, or that we can't empathize with him. It's not necessarily a moral judgment on him. It's just hard to know who he is or what he wants. He doesn't seem to give a shit that he's getting executed for a crime he didn't commit. It doesn't seem to matter to him. And if he doesn't care, I kind of don't care either in a way. It's fascinating in a weird sort of way, but at the end,
sort of academic sense. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I'm left with emotionally. Very little. It is all kind of just like, well, I can piece the theme together from this then, I mean, having this conversation, honestly, I think has made me a little bit more, a little more forgiving of some of the things that bothered me with the film. I think I like it more now, having talked about it, but it's still like a tough one to embrace, and it doesn't want you to either. It's very just like, no,
The voiceover stuff is tough because it should ostensibly it gives us this direct line into this guy, this very you know.
It feels like it's real time too. It's not like a noir, you know, like it feels like these are the thoughts he's having scene to scene.
Well, yeah, they play the trick where he's like in the middle of a voiceover narration, and then he gets the call from Big Dave, goes there, has a conversation with him, kills him, comes back to the bedroom where got the call, and then picks up the voiceover in the sentence he left it off in.
Right.
Which is one of my favorite like structural gags in any movie ever. It doesn't fully land that much for some reason in this. Like, it took me a while to realize that even happened. And then, of course, the whole nature of the voiceover becoming a thing where it feels like he's talking to us directly in the audience. And then it's the very end, it's revealed, oh, he's actually writing this to a magazine
Right.
as an article. And so it's not as intimate even as we might have thought it was. We're even farther away from this guy's interior than we were led to believe. So much this movie exists in the voiceover, you know, like like you said, that final line with Doris, that relationship exists so much in the voiceover. It's so much of, I'm struck by, I think Doris's best two lines as a character are not actually delivered by Frances McDormand. They're delivered by Billy Bob in voiceover. And McDormand is such an incredible actress that somehow I hear her saying those lines anyway, and they still like work for me.
What's the best line she gets to deliver? I hate WAPs, maybe?
Yeah.
Wow. How have we glossed over the raging racism and like sexism?
It's the 1950s.
It's the 50s, but it's like that's his like brother or something.
Yep.
I want to say I think you're on to something here when it comes to I mean, as a film itself, right? It is a film that relies heavily on voiceover, very little music, unless you count, royalty-free classics that, like, I guess an average barber wouldn't be able to identify. And I mean, on those levels, it's like I don't know why I gave it a buy. Like, usually those are the things that frustrate me. Like, I like a little bit more score, or like a little bit less talking. But I still find a lot of the visuals to be striking in their own way. That it's
Stunning
really
film.
clear. Yes.
Yeah.
But I have no eagerness to revisit it anytime soon. I think as this conversation, while it's actually made me appreciate it more, it's also made me think this is a really soul crushing film. And I need a bit more of an injection of optimism elsewhere.
It doesn't get any more uplifting as you dig in deeper into it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to care more. All I'm going to do is care more. I'm going to try, and I'm going to care, and I'm going to find meaning in life, because like the alternative is really rough and kind of weird. And there's UFOs, which are now real.
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
We'll do a whole other podcast on UFOs. I don't know.
Oh, please. I would love that. Yeah.
We should.
No, well, one of the lines, I mean, the one line I think is the best is, that McDormand delivers is about just when Ed asks her if she thinks they're moving too fast when she proposes them getting married right away. And she says, why? Does it get better? Or he says, like, we don't know each other that well. And like, that's great. Yeah. And the other thing is when they're doing bingo at the beginning, and Ed says that Doris would probably tell you that our reward is on this earth, and bingo is about the extent of it. And during that, it pans down from the cross to the bingo caller. Instead of like a priest in a pulpit, he's pulling bingo balls out, which strikes me as a very nihilistic statement on religion, that it's God playing dice with the universe.
Well, this is a film where, I mean, it's film noir, so there's a little nihilism baked in, but this is the kind of movie that, does not come up when people talk about the nihilism of the Coen brothers films, but this is right there. I think this is part of the reason they have that reputation.
Maybe the most.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I don't know how much it contributes to the reputation just because people didn't watch it.
Right. There's that. But, it's also one I think that, like Lee, I haven't seen this since it came out. And this was me revisiting it, over 20 years later and trying to and discovering how much of my memories of it were accurate and how much of it I was kind of just like, oh, yeah, there's more going on here than I realized. But to what end? I remember the big things. And the big things were just like, it's a bit of a bummer, but you don't actually feel it emotionally, it's
That's a good
just
way
sort
to
of
put it,
it's dark, and I think the more you tease it out, I guess there's a little bit more kind of soul destruction going on in there.
I'm starting to. It's starting to make me to drag me down more the more we talk about it.
There are funny moments though. There are moments that genuinely make me crack up. that and I think that's just, I don't know what that might have to do with the entire theme of it, because I still think it's a pretty cynical film, but I
think the Coen brothers just find humor everywhere.
I know. I will say, because it's just one of those things, aside from maybe like No Country for Old Men, I can find humor in a lot of like Coen brothers films.
I think No Country's actually pretty funny when you
is it now?
Faces.
Okay, but if you look at it with a certain intention, like if like Anton Chigurh's hair comes in, it's like, okay, this is actually going to be this is going to work out just fine. Okay, like,
it's an incredibly deep, dark film and soul crushing, but there's a lot of just funny little lines sprinkled in there.
There you go.
That's not what people take away from it necessarily, but now I've seen it enough times that now I remember them all. Everything Garrett Dillahunt says and does.
Mm-hmm. There's nothing terribly funny in The Man Who Wasn't There. It is the driest sense of humor imaginable. You know, it's about as po-faced as the Coen brothers get in that regard.
Yeah, they're
there is stuff like, you know, Michael Badalucco writing Garibaldi the pig that is just sort of, you know, just funny to look at, I guess.
The pie eating contest really did impress me. I was just genuinely like, you know what? Like he can't go on, says the opera singer, and then boom.
There's nothing I'd less like to do than to participate in a pie eating contest. My God.
On a full stomach? Yeah, for sure. On an empty stomach, actually, I think I'd be down. That looked like a good even in black and white, that blueberry pie looked phenomenal.
Okay, but Badalucco's character is somebody who fully participates in life. You know, he's dumb about
he loves his life. Yeah, loves being a barber.
Yeah. He embraces it. He talks to everybody who comes in, talks their ear off. It says, sure, pie eating contest. I'm already full. Why not? Let's ride that pig. I want to experience things. It's everything. And of course, how well does that serve him? He's sick for the pie eating contest too. You know, he's a destroyed man by the end of this movie. Like,
loses all his money, his family.
His zest for life does not serve him better than Ed Crane's lack of zest for life. That's what's so nihilistic about this.
Well, now I changed my mind. I'm not going to try anymore. I thought that was the lesson here. I thought we had like two options, and both of them end to the same.
Oh, we do. I don't buy that. I think Michael Badalucco.
It's all about the journey, man. Like,
you know, we are all talking about this November 7th, 2024. For context.
Here we go.
No. Just you know, it's natural to feel nihilistic sometimes.
Sure.
And feel like there's no hope. And maybe films like The Man Who Wasn't There help us kind of deal with those emotions and feelings. And you know, it's like watching a horror film in a way. You know, you can kind of exercise some negative thoughts with this film.
Yeah, I don't know. There's catharsis in a horror film, I feel like. It's lacking here. That's what I think is so difficult about this one, is the lack of catharsis. Like, even No Country provides a little more of that.
Oh, no. It's like, oh, you want catharsis? How about you get fucked? That's No Country for Old Men.
That is a catharsis. That's what horror movies are. You know, that Jason Voorhees kills everybody is a catharsis.
That should end up in a movie poster somewhere. It's like, how about you get fucked? And that's it. That's actually a good way, just in case anyone hasn't seen No Country for Old Men. It's like, strap yourselves in, people. It's going to be.
That one's going to be fun. I love that movie so much.
It's a dark road ahead, folks. We got Intolerable Cruelty next, and then The Lady Killers, and No Country for Old Men, and Burn After Reading. That's a vicious run of films. For a variety of reasons. So
do nothing, people. That's the lesson. Just do nothing. Don't be ambitious. Don't try. Second chair in a barber shop is perfectly fine existence. Watch Soul. Watch Soul instead, because there's a whole scene about a barber and he's perfectly fine. So like, just stop it. Just stop trying. There's nothing more. This is good. Like, life is good. Just stop it. Let your wife cheat on you. It's fine. You know, and leave 15-year-old girls alone. And like, if they suck a piano, they'll figure it out. Okay. Do not help them. I don't know what else to take away. And you know, lawyers from Sacramento are not to be trusted. They're way too expensive.
Yeah, look, this one, it does not have an uplifting moral. I'm sorry.
Was that too much? Did I just go on too much of a diatribe about what I've learned today?
No, I think that's perfect. That's
okay.
That's how we end, I think. Okay. Much like The Man Who Wasn't There. That's
the Homer Simpson lesson. The lesson is never try.
What's going on?
Appearances can be deceptive. Tom, I was just speculating about a hypothesis. I know I don't know nothing.
uncertainty. That is appropriate for matters of this world.